Well, your so-called future wife is a woman who sleeps with men for money, Sandra blurted out. What? Yemi exclaimed. Disbelief etched on his face. That's not true. Sandra swiftly pulled out her phone and showed Yemi pictures as proof. Yemi stared at the images in shock, feeling a wave of confusion and betrayal. In the bustling city of Abuja, Nigeria, there were two women named Linda and Sandra who lived together in the same flats. At first, they were just roommates, but as time passed, they became the best of friends. They did everything together, cooked meals, watched movies, and shared stories late into the night. Even though Linda and Sandra had been inseparable for a long time and cared deeply for each other, they were very different in many ways. As they shared their lives together in Abuja, Linda and Sandra learned from one another and grew closer as friends. They supported each other through good times and bad, creating memories that would last a lifetime. Sandra was known for her gentle and easygoing nature. Growing up in a strict Christian family, she was considered by many to be a good person who followed moral values. She always tried to help others and live a virtuous life. Sandra went to church regularly and even helped out there as a worker. After finishing university, she looked for jobs but could only find work at a small company. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to get by each day. Linda, on the other hand, was quite different from Sandra. She led a life that some people might not approve of. Linda went to clubs often. She smoked and drank and had relationships with men for money. She was a prostitute. Even though she lived this way, Linda received attention and support from men. She would go out and return with so much money and gifts. Different cars would drop her off at home. Linda was really happy and doing well for herself. Sandra believed strongly that everyone should do what makes them happy, even if it meant Linda choosing a lifestyle that Sandra didn't agree with. Sandra had tried to talk to Linda about her choices a few times, but it didn't work out well. So she decided to let Linda make her own decisions. Sometimes, Sandra would invite Linda to come with her to church, hoping that Linda might find some peace or guidance there. Despite Linda's lifestyle that Sandra disapproved of, they were still very close friends who supported each other through thick and thin. They would often spend time together, watching movies and enjoying meals together. Sandra would listen to Linda and often advise her when Linda wanted it. But otherwise, she respected Linda's choices and stood by her as a friend. Their friendship was strong because they cared about each other and accepted each other for who they were, despite their major differences. Sandra woke up early every morning and returned home late in the evening, often feeling very tired from her long day at work. Meanwhile, Linda was usually at home during the day or went out later at night, but she always seemed to have a lot of money. There were times when Linda even helped Sandra out with money when Sandra's office paid late, which made Sandra wonder. As a girl who believed in doing things the right way, Sandra found it puzzling that she was struggled despite her effort to live a good life. On the other hand, Linda, who lived a more carefree and unconventional life, appeared to be receiving more favors and support. Sandra couldn't help but notice how Linda continued to do well for herself. Despite these thoughts, Sandra reminded herself that everyone's journey was different. She focused on her own values and principles, understanding that success came in many forms and wasn't always measured by material wealth. Linda's lifestyle might have brought her financial gains, but Sandra valued the peace of mind that came with staying true to herself and her beliefs. Sandra had never dated anyone, not because she didn't want to, but because the men who were interested in her were not the type she was looking for. They didn't have much money and were struggling in their lives. Because of this, Sandra remained single for a long time. However, Linda had more than 3 men who were deeply in love with her. These were not ordinary or poor men. They were wealthy. Some owned big businesses, while others worked in well-known companies and earned good salaries. They had nice cars and big houses. Meanwhile, Linda seemed to be like a magnet for gifts and money and attention from men. This made Sandra wonder even more about her own situation. Slowly, Sandra started feeling jealous. She couldn't help but compare her life to Linda's and wondered why things weren't going as smoothly for her, despite her efforts to live a righteous and principled life. Despite these feelings of jealousy, Sandra tried to remind herself that everyone's life journey was different. She focused on being patient and believing that the right person will come along at the right time. Sandra knew that it was important to stay true to herself and wait for someone who shared her values and beliefs. One day, Linda brought a man named Yemi home to meet her best friend, Sandra. Yemi was the CEO of a successful company, rich and incredibly handsome. When Sandra saw him, she was surprised, but what shocked her the most was when Yemi expressed his love for Linda and his desire to marry her. Sandra tried her best to hide her shock and not show it too much. Seeing Yemi's interest in Linda stirred up many thoughts in Sandra's mind. She wondered why men like Yemi seemed to be drawn to Linda instead of her. Sandra knew she was beautiful, educated, and lived by strong moral values. Yet, here was Linda, who frequented clubs and moved from one man to another, attracting attention from successful men like Yemi. This made Sandra feel even more jealous and confused. As Sandra wrestled with her feelings, she couldn't help but think about what she could do next. She felt torn between her friendship with Linda and her own desire for love and companionship. Deep down, Sandra knew she needed to address her feelings of jealousy and find a way to support her friend, even if it meant facing her own insecurities. Yemi was very serious about marrying Linda because he loved her carefree, friendly, and funny personality. He had already met her parents and was eager to build a future with her. Linda, in turn, had fallen deeply in love with Yemi and had made significant changes in her life. She had left behind her wild ways. No more hopping from one man to another, no more late nights at clubs. She was committed to making her relationship with Yemi work. One day, Yemi visited Linda at her apartment, but she wasn't home. Linda called Sandra and asked her to entertain Yemi until she returned. Sandra, who had been struggling with jealousy and had been thinking about sabotaging Yemi and Linda's relationship, saw this as her golden opportunity. Sandra hurried to her room and dressed in a very revealing outfit. She carefully did her makeup and hair, trying to look her best. Feeling confident, she went to the living room and sat next to Yemi, hoping to seduce him. However, Yemi was taken aback by Sandra's behavior. He became angry and sternly told her to stop. Without waiting for a response, Yemi left the apartment, feeling disappointed and upset by Sandra's actions. As soon as Yemi left, Sandra dialed Linda's number, tears streaming down her face. When Linda answered, Sandra cried uncontrollably, claiming that Yemi had tried to seduce her, but she had refused his advances. In reality, It was Sandra who had attempted to seduce Yemi, but she lied to protect herself from Linda's anger and disappointment. Upon hearing Sandra's story, Linda was shocked and deeply hurt. She couldn't believe Yemi would betray her trust in such a way. Fuming with anger, Linda stormed over to Yemi's house to confront him. Bursting through the door, confronted Yemi, demanding an explanation. "How could you do this to me?" Linda cried out. "How could you try to seduce my best friend?" Yemi was shocked by Linda's accusations. "What are you talking about?" he exclaimed, genuinely confused. "I never did that. In fact, Sandra was the one who tried to seduce me, but I turned down and left." Linda was torn. She had known Sandra for a long time, and they had shared everything together. Part of her wanted to believe Sandra, but another part couldn't ignore the love she felt for Yemi and the disbelief that he could betray her. She was caught in a whirlwind of confusion and conflicting emotions. Unable to make sense of it all, Linda left Yemi's house, feeling more confused and hurt than ever. She needed time to sort through her feelings and decide whom to trust and believe. Deep down, she hoped she could find the truth and salvage her relationship with Yemi, while also understanding what had driven Sandra to lie and betray their friendship. When Linda returned home after confronting Yemi, Sandra repeated her fabricated story, tearfully warning her friend to be cautious of Yemi, insisting he wasn't a good person. "Are you sure you want to marry him?" Sandra asked, trying to sow doubt. Linda, however, remained steadfast in her love for Yemi. "It's okay," she reassured Sandra. "The truth will come out eventually. I believe in Yemi, and I think there's just been a misunderstanding between you two." Despite Sandra's attempts to undermine Yemi in Linda's eye, Linda's relationship with Yemi continued to flourish. They were still making plans for their wedding, which frustrated Sandra even more. She couldn't understand why Yemi hadn't broken up with Linda after her deception. Why isn't he leaving her? Sandra asked herself in frustration. As days passed, Sandra grew increasingly resentful. She felt torn between her loyalty to Linda and her own jealousy and hurt feelings. Meanwhile, Linda remained optimistic and hopeful about her future with Yemi. She cherished their love and believed in their relationship. Despite the doubts planted by Sandra, deep down, Linda hoped that Sandra would come to accept Yemi and support their happiness, but she knew it would take time to mend the rifts between her best friend and her fiancé. Linda started noticing a change in Sandra's behavior. She observed how Sandra often said negative things about Yemi, trying to convince her that he wasn't a good person. In turn, Yemi also expressed concerns to Linda about Sandra, cautioning her that Sandra might not have Linda's best interest at heart. "I don't think Sandra wants the best for you," Yemi would say, his voice tinged with worry. As the date for Yemi and Linda's wedding was set, Linda excitedly asked Sandra to be her chief bridesmaid, and Sandra agreed outwardly. However, deep down, Sandra seethed with jealousy and anger. How could someone who had lived a wild lifestyle be getting married before her, when she had always upheld moral values? These feelings festered into her, fueling her determination to stop the wedding and break off Yemi and Linda's engagement. One day, Sandra called Yemi, insisting that she had something important to discuss with him. Yemi, wary of Sandra's past and actions and lies, hesitated to meet her in person. He suggested they talked over the phone instead, but Sandra refused, insisting on a face-to-face meeting. Reluctantly, Yemi agreed to meet in a public space to avoid any further misunderstandings or complications. They met in a busy cafe, where Sandra nervously began to speak, her voice filled with urgency. She started recounting Linda's past, hoping to convince Yemi to call off the engagement. They met at a bustling restaurant, and Sandra took a seat, her mind racing with nerves. Unknowns to her, Yemi had discreetly set his phone to record their conversation, wanting to document everything Sandra said. "Sandra, just tell me what you need to say so I can leave," Yemi urged impatiently. "I don't have time for this." "Do you even know who you are marrying?" Sandra asked, her voice with tense urgency. Yemi frowned, growing impatient. "Talk or I am leaving," he warned, his tone sharp. "Well, your so-called future wife is a woman who sleeps with men for money," Sandra blurted out, her voice tinged with accusation. "What?" Yemi exclaimed, disbelief etched on his face. "That's not true." Sandra swiftly pulled out her phone and showed Yemi pictures as proof. Yemi stared at the images in shock, feeling a wave of confusion and betrayal wash over him. Linda had never mentioned anything like this to him. Yemi rushed home, his mind racing with turmoil. Why hadn't Linda told him about her past? Frustration and anger simmered within him. He immediately called Linda, insisting she come over so they could talk immediately. Linda arrived at Yemi's house to find him visibly upset. "What is wrong, Yemi?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. "Why didn't you tell me?" Yemi demanded, his tone accusatory. "Tell me that you used to sleep with men for money." Linda's heart sank as Yemi recounted everything Sandra had told him. She was stunned and overwhelmed with guilt. "Oh my God, Yemi, I am so sorry," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "Everything Sandra said is true, but I stopped when I met you. I have never done it since, and I promise I never will again. I was just so scared you'd leave me if you found out." Yemi listened, his emotions in turmoil. He had always warned Linda about Sandra, sensing her jealousy and distrust. "She was jealous of you," Yemi explained softly, "and now look at the mess it caused." Linda cried harder, begging Yemi for forgiveness. She felt devastated that her past had been revealed in such a painful way, and she feared losing Yemi forever. Yemi sighed heavily, needing time to process everything. "I need some time alone to think," he finally said, his voice strained with emotion. Linda returned home from Yemi's house, feeling deeply saddened by what had transpired. When she saw Sandra, anger surged through her. "Sandra, why did you do this to me?" Linda demanded, her voice trembling with hurt. "Why did you go and tell Yemi about my past?" Sandra looked taken aback, her expression conflicted. "Linda, what exactly is the problem? Stop shouting at me," she said, not feeling any form of remorse. "Are you the only one? I don't even understand. I did everything right, but no man ever notices me. I work hard for my money, but you have men and money at your fingertips. I couldn't help but feel jealous." Linda couldn't believe her ears. Her best friend had betrayed her trust out of jealousy and is not feeling any form of remorse. Tears streamed down her face as she made a difficult decision. "From today onward, we are no longer friends," she declared firmly. "I can't be friends with someone who envies me. Thank you for everything, but I will pack my things and leave this house." For a while, Linda stayed in a different apartment, trying to sort her thoughts and emotions. A week later, Yemi called her and asked to meet. Linda agreed and went to his house. Yemi sat her down and spoke sincerely. "I forgive you, Linda. I love you so much, and I won't let your past affect our present or our future," he assured her tenderly. "You stopped that lifestyle when we met, which shows me how much you care for me." Linda was overwhelmed with relief and happiness. She promised Yemi that she would be the best partner for him and assured him that she would never go back to her previous life. They embraced tightly, both feeling a renewed sense of love and commitment. Meanwhile, Sandra was devastated when she saw Yemi and Linda's pre-wedding photos. What? How could Yemi still want to marry Linda? She wondered aloud. feeling shocked and upset. Alone in her room, she cried all day, consumed by heartbreak. She realized that she had pushed away the people who cared about her the most. Yemi and Linda's wedding became the talk of the town, despite Linda's past. Yemi treated her with unwavering love, kindness, and respect. However, Linda found it hard to trust others and struggled to make new friends. Sandra, regretful and lonely, wanted to reconcile with Linda. She reached out and apologized sincerely, acknowledging her mistakes. Linda accepted her apology, but chose to keep their friendship at a distance. Over time, Sandra learned from her actions and grew to understand the importance of honesty and loyalty in friendship, and also understand that the journey of life is not equal. It's very different for different people. Though Linda forgave her, Sandra knew that rebuilding trust would take time and effort. She vowed to become a better person and cherish the friendship she had left.